It has been a fortnight, and in that short span of time, Russia's communications have collapsed, and Ukraine has launched a devastating counterattack in the southeast. Putin's frontline is disintegrating under the relentless Ukrainian pressure, and as Ukraine rips the Russian frontline to shreds, Putin's forces scatter like headless chickens in a humiliating display of the real state of the Russian army: lost, desperate, stagnant. Russia's is a broken army that has flatlined in Ukraine. In the wake of Russian communications collapsing earlier in February, Ukraine has launched a counteroffensive in the southeast of the country that continues to push forward. Ukraine's soldiers, who advance from the west and north, are pushing Putin's forces out of settlements that they thought they'd secured, and Russia can't do much about it. Sure, Russia is trying to rush firepower and reinforcements to the areas where Ukraine is counterattacking, but it isn't enough. Russia has become frantic in panic, and that all adds up to yet more gains for Ukraine in a war that Putin was trying to claim was all but over toward the end of 2025. In a few minutes, we're going to explain the reasons why Ukraine is tearing Russia's southeastern frontline to shreds. But first and foremost, let's head to Dobroply, a small mining town that is about 95 kilometers, or 59 miles, west of Donetsk. Dobroply has long been a bastion for Ukraine. When separatists in the Donetsk region were trying desperately to push through Putin's ambition of taking that particular region back in 2014, the entrepreneurs and activists in the town organized themselves to protect their status as Ukrainians. Not a lot has changed since, though Russia continuously launches offensives in the Dobroply sector as it attempts to surround key cities in Donetsk. Ukraine keeps pushing back, and in mid-February, Ukraine not only defended but launched a counterattack that left Putin's forces devastated. Dobroply straddles the line between the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia oblasts, where Ukraine has been counterattacking en masse since early February. Near that line, Russia's 36th Combined Arms Army holds positions across the western edge of Dobroply, from which it attempts to launch assaults on the village. Those Russian soldiers tried again in an incident recounted on February 18th by Ukraine's 33rd Separate Assault Regiment, or OSHP, on Telegram. The enemy advanced with a truckload full of disposable Russians with the intention of reaching the deployment point from which he planned to storm the village of Dobroply, but the fighters of the 33rd OSHP, together with adjacent units, stood in his way. The regiment declares in its post, "Let's get that straight." Russia loaded a contingent of soldiers into a single vehicle and then just drove straight at a Ukrainian position in broad daylight. This is desperation, and the outcome is precisely what you would expect it to be. Euromaidan press reports that the Russian convoy, if you can call it that when there was only one vehicle, was easily spotted by Ukraine as it attempted to roll along the R-85, formerly T-0401 highway, which is just north of Dobroply. Ukraine's reconnaissance drones easily spotted it, as revealed in a video shared by the same outlet. The vehicle, which was slow-moving and had no chance of evading, was struck right in the windshield by a kamikaze drone. The Russians inside scattered, but left out in the open and in daylight, they were easy targets for Ukraine. One by one, the Russian soldiers trying to drive toward Dobroply were picked off by Ukraine's artillery. By the end of the Ukrainian counterattack, up to 15 of Putin's patsies lay dead or wounded in open fields and scattered woodland. All because they launched a ridiculous assault that anybody with half a brain would know that Ukraine would spot easily. We mean, the Russians were trying to move in on Ukraine's defenders in daylight and across open territory. Such a stupid attack could only be launched by an army that has run out of ideas and has no defined strategy. But that is Russia in the southeast of Ukraine right now. Putin's forces are running around like headless chickens in humiliating attempts at assaulting Ukraine, and as we said earlier, there are several reasons why. First up, communications. Russia basically doesn't have them anymore. In early February, Ukraine and engineers from Elon Musk's SpaceX collaborated on the creation of a new whitelist system through which Starlink terminals could be registered for use in Ukraine. That alone doesn't seem like a big deal. But what the whitelist did was essentially serve as a blacklist for all the illicit Starlink terminals that Russia has been using on the front lines. Don't underestimate the impact this has had on Russia's ability to control its forces. Starlink was used by Russia to communicate orders and other key information. As Euromaidan press points out, frontline operation units, strike drone operators, and fire correction teams all used it. That's gone now, and Russia is feeling the pain. To rub salt in the gaping Russian communication wound, Putin himself made what may go down as his dumbest decision since he launched his supposed special military operation. With his soldiers scrambling to find a replacement for Starlink, Putin decided to severely limit access to the social media platform Telegram, which Reuters reports the Kremlin has been trying to do since 2018. That Telegram crackdown couldn't have come at a worse time for Russia's forces. Already struggling without Starlink, Putin's soldiers lost access to an app the Moscow Times notes they used extensively for tactical and operational command in Ukraine. Telegram helps Russia's forces to organize logistics, download maps, send real-time footage, and even raise funds to equip the soldiers that Putin is trying to send into Ukraine without any equipment. The Russian pro-war blogger Fighter Bomber summed the situation up, stating, "Within a day after Telegram's slowdown, I receive about 5 videos from anonymous military personnel complaining that they are completely screwed without Telegram." You want the main reason why Russia thought it would be smart to attack Dobroply in broad daylight using one truck. You now have the answer. The soldiers in that truck had no idea what they were doing. With communications collapsing across the front lines, they are literally as directionless as headless chickens. All they can do is try to keep pushing forward in whatever way they can, making them easy pickings for Ukraine's counterattacks. What this has led to is an enormously successful Ukrainian campaign in the southeast that has resulted in the liberation of vast swathes of territory. We'll dig into what Ukraine is achieving with its counterattack later in the video, but for now, the evidence is mounting that Russia is lost without Starlink and Telegram. In the immediate aftermath of the Starlink shutdown, a Ukrainian drone operator named Giovanni revealed how Russia has been weakened to the BBC. The Russians lost their ability to control the field, Giovanni claimed, adding, "I think they lost 50% of their capacity for offense. That's what the numbers show. Fewer assaults, fewer enemy drones, fewer everything." Russia has gotten so desperate to get Starlink back that it's attempting to bribe collaborators in the occupied territories to give them registered terminals they can use on the front lines. This is not what one of the supposed strongest militaries in the world is meant to be doing. Russia simply has no solutions. Euromaidan Press adds that the twin cutoff of Starlink and Telegram has made it much more difficult for Russia to surveil Ukraine properly, which is having a massive knock-on effect on attacks launched on the ground. Russia's drones can still fly, but operators have no easy way to communicate what drones see to the infantry, which leads to situations like a unit trying to drive into Dobroply as recklessly as we saw on February 18th. Did that unit even know where it was heading? How much information did it have? None of these questions have answers, but the outcome is that Ukraine launched a devastating counterattack without even having to use soldiers, all because Russia's forces are now being forced to attack without their important communication systems. The same outlet offers a few more details about what Russia seemed to be trying to achieve with its truck full of now-dead soldiers. The 36th Combined Arms Army have been blindly marching in the direction of Zaporizhia city since the Starlink cutoff. Ukraine had been picking off the marchers in the gray zone leading up to the city, which is an area that neither side controls but is an absolute death trap for anybody who enters. Methodically, Ukraine had picked holes in the Russian line around Dobroply, enabling counterattacks that panicked the Russians into sending reserve units into the fight. It's possible that the Russian soldiers in the Dobroply truck were reservists sent to reinforce an already failed assault. They didn't last long. Now Russia is coming up with desperate ways to overcome its communications problems. But before we dig into that, you are watching the military show. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to hit that button. As for the desperate solution that Russia has hit upon to replace Starlink, it's balloons. As Forbes contributor Vikram Mittal noted in a February 17th article, Russia has turned to the Barrage 1 system to reignite its communications. It's essentially a system that amounts to a balloon that can carry 5G terminals into the stratosphere. It's actually a fairly smart system, especially due to the pneumatic ballast system built into it that allows the balloon to adjust its altitude as needed. However, it's also a type of balloon that was never intended for the purpose that Russia is now using. The Barrage 1 is built to carry a payload of up to 100 kilograms or about 220 pounds, so it's clear the balloon is meant to be an offensive weapon, not a communications platform. There is no replacement for Russia's loss of access to Starlink. The thousands of satellites that make up the Starlink system can't be emulated by military balloons that can currently fly for only a handful of days. Even after proposed upgrades, the Barrage 1 will only be usable for a few weeks before the balloon comes back down. This is Russia's solution to the Starlink problem, and it's putting itself in a position where it will only be able to create pockets of connectivity using a solution that costs money to build and requires stable logistics to get to where it needs to go before it's even launched. All of these are problems for Russia that explain Ukraine's powerful counterattack. There's more. As it grapples with the collapse of communications on the front lines, Russia is also dealing with another problem that explains why its offensives are so weak that they're immediately countered by Ukraine. Russia's army has flatlined on the manpower front. That's according to Euromaidan Press, which says that Russia's army hasn't grown for the past 6 months, even as Putin's forces adjust their tactics. Russia is stuck with about 711,000 soldiers, and though that seems like a lot, when Putin's only strategy is to send meat into the grinder against Ukraine, having a stagnant army means that Russia is being forced to pull soldiers from various locations inside Ukraine and into regions that Putin considers to be priorities. What this does, Euromaidan Press reveals, is create weak points across the front lines as reservists are pulled away. Ukraine's counterattacks take advantage of these weak points as they destroy the stragglers who aren't being reinforced with more soldiers or equipment because those reinforcements have headed elsewhere. Ukraine is making Russia pay for this weakening of its front lines, and we can see that in the numbers. According to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, Ukraine eliminated 35,000 of Russia's soldiers in December 2025 alone. When we say eliminated, we mean these Russian troops were killed. The number doesn't include the injured or those that Ukraine captured. This is 35,000 soldiers who have been taken out of the equation permanently and that Russia has been forced to replace. In January, Ukraine almost repeated that feat. This time it was around 30,000 Russian soldiers killed, with most deaths being verified via Ukraine's Delta system. The number may be slightly lower, but it's still astronomical for a month's worth of fighting in a 21st century war. Russia is searching for a reason why it stalled out at around the 711,000 mark in terms of the manpower it has in Ukraine. Losing about 65,000 soldiers in just 2 months is a pretty big one. Another big reason is that Russian recruiting is in the toilet. As Russian casualties have surpassed 1.25 million since Putin launched his invasion, we're finally at the point that Russia is losing more soldiers monthly than it's managing to recruit. United 24 Media highlighted this in a February 19th article, where it revealed that the ratio of Russian losses to Ukrainian losses is so massive in some areas of the front that Russia is suffering as many as 20 to 25 casualties per Ukrainian casualty in some regions. These are unsustainable numbers, and they're showing in Russia's recruiting. In January, Russia lost 9,000 more troops than it managed to recruit as volunteers, which is a shortfall that already seems to be leading to Putin pushing for mobilization that he knows will be extremely unpopular in Russia. And what we're seeing here is that Russia's troop stagnation is actually as good as it's going to get for Putin until he pulls the trigger on mobilization, assuming he's foolish enough to do so. With Russia now losing more soldiers than it recruits, the 711,000 that is the flatline figure is going to come down. What if Ukraine achieves a similar ratio in February? That would put Russia's army in Ukraine at 702,000. And if the pattern continues, what was once an overwhelming and seemingly endless force gets whittled down into a vulnerable army. It's pretty simple. More dead Russian soldiers who aren't replaced open up more opportunities for Ukraine to launch counterattacks. Each lost soldier amounts to a weaker Russia. And not even Russia's tactical adaptations can do anything about it. As Putin's front line breaks down, he's increasingly relying on smaller assault groups that he uses to infiltrate the gray areas that we mentioned earlier. This approach has been successful in the sense that it allows Russia to sneak soldiers into Ukrainian territory. But far too often, these soldiers end up isolated as the backup that is supposed to reinforce the footholds that they create doesn't end up coming. A strategy that is supposed to lead to fewer deaths in the Russian ranks clearly isn't working, as the figures for January and December reveal. Ukraine's intelligent use of drones is the big reason why. As Russia tries to push forward with its new strategy, Ukraine's drones patrol the gray zones looking both for isolated Russian units and opportunities for Ukrainian counterattacks. As Euromaidan Press reports, Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Forces, or USF, are more important now than they've ever been. Since the summer of 2025, the USF's numbers of verified combat results, which includes confirmed hits, target destruction, and fire damage, has increased from 4% to 33%. About 60% of Ukraine's firepower comes from its drones, and these unmanned machines are doing a real number on Russia's soldiers. According to Zelensky, at least 80% of the successful strikes that Ukraine conducts against Russia's forces are now being carried out by drones, and this success rate is opening up plenty of avenues for Ukraine's counterattacks against Putin's crumbling front lines. We saw that in Dobroply. All it took was one drone to spot the Russian truck and another to take the vehicle out. Russia's forces scattered into the kill zone, and Ukraine was able to ambush them with artillery, leading to yet more death. Russia's tactical adaptation hasn't worked, though it hasn't stopped it from lying about its battlefield gains, as you'll find out if you stick with us for a couple of minutes. Before we get to that, we told you earlier that Ukraine has achieved huge success with its counteroffensives in the south and southeast of the country. We believe the words that we used were that Ukraine has liberated vast swathes of territory. UA Wire has the details. It reports on comments made by the Ukrainian military, which says that its counteroffensive strategy is all about ruining Russia's plans to push deeper into Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia in the summer. Since the start of the operation, the air assault grouping, together with adjacent units, has restored control over more than 300 square kilometers of territory, cleared of enemy sabotage and reconnaissance groups, and over 8 settlements, Ukraine's military claims. Bear in mind that this isn't the final result of the counter-operation that we're seeing right now. The amount of territory reclaimed is going to grow for as long as Russia struggles with communication and manpower issues, and neither of those problems look like they're going to get a real solution anytime soon. Who knows, after destroying the attempted Russian offensive in Dnipropetrovsk, Ukraine may have opened the door for a deeper push into that sector that helps to keep Russia away from the village that it's targeting. The southern operation is clearly reaping massive benefits for Ukraine. And yet Russia is still trying to maintain its false aura of dominance, and nowhere is that clearer than in Kupyansk. Though not part of Ukraine's southern push, as the city is in the northeastern Kharkiv Oblast, Kupyansk serves as a reminder that Russia will lie through its teeth about what's happening in Ukraine, even as its front line collapses around it. Right now, Russia has a tiny garrison of about 40 to 50 soldiers in that city, after having previously claimed that it had taken Kupyansk. Do you think that Russia is going to admit that it's lost the city? Of course not. As Euromaidan Press reports, the chief of the General Staff of Russia's army, Valery Gerasimov, is the man who claimed that Kupyansk had fallen to Russia in late 2025. Russia wanted to assess the reality of the situation, so its Western military grouping sent out a commission to determine the success or otherwise of the Kupyansk offensive. Russia concluded that the frontline reports of victory from 2025 corresponded to what is seen on the battlefield. However, the inspectors dispatched to the city had a secret. They were acting under the auspices of Gerasimov, the very man who propagated the Kupyansk lie in the first place. Here we see the reality that Russia refuses to face. As Ukraine's relentless counterattacks break Russia's back, Putin's top generals are lying about what's really happening on the battlefield. Russia's army is aimless and failing, and Ukraine is making Putin pay for every mistake that he's making. If you want a dose of reality in Kupyansk, we can tell you exactly what has happened in the city. Don't believe the Russian lies, because Kupyansk is actually a microcosm of the collapse of the Russian front lines all over Ukraine. To find out more, make sure you check out our news. And if you enjoyed this news, subscribe to the military radio so you're always ahead of the curve when it comes to what's really happening in Ukraine. And thank you as always for watching.